How many of you can tell me what happened 50 years ago yesterday? What's that? Landed on the moon and walked on the moon for the first time. That's right. That was 50 years ago. I was pretty small back then, but I still remember it vaguely. And I think about the time in which that happened. It was a great feat. At the time that it happened, we were still using rotary dial phones. Remember them? The idea of a mobile phone didn't even exist yet, though the Department of Defense was developing the concepts that would eventually become the cell phone system. Cars were a lot bigger. Air conditioning was optional. Matter of fact, it was just a few years before the heater was optional. You had to pay extra to get a heater. The world has changed drastically since we landed on the moon. The idea of an answering machine, much less voicemail, was not available to most people. Back then, are you ready for this, young ones, kids, young adults? I only had 4 channels on my TV set. Now we have 150 and still there's nothing to watch. I told my kids that when I was growing up, we didn't have videotape VCRs. And they called me liars. They just knew that VCRs have been around for a long time. Things have changed over the years. Change is a constant in our society. Jesus was a change agent himself. And today as we start a new series called Parables, Unlocking the Kingdom Code. And as you know, parables are little stories that Jesus told that gave spiritual truths. But you had to have the right attitude to understand what he was saying. He said you had to have the right ears to hear what he had to say. Well, before we look at the parable itself, let's look at what happened right before it. Luke chapter 5, verses 27 through 31. It says, after this, Jesus went out and saw a tax collector by the name of Levi sitting at his toll booth. What was Levi's other name? Let's try that again. What was Levi's other name? Matthew, that's right. He wrote a gospel. Follow me, Jesus said to him. And Levi got up, left everything, and followed Jesus. Then Levi held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect complained to his disciples, "Why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus answered them, "It's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick." Jesus was drastic. He was radical for his time. Because what he did was, rather than wait for people to come to him, he went to the people. Rather than expecting them to be perfect before they would be loved and accepted, he loved them as they were. Radical change for the time. And we ourselves as Christians and the church need to learn from him today if we want to be more effective as Christians and make a difference in this world. We need to follow the example of Jesus. But it's going to require something from us. And as we have to change, just as the times have changed, we have to change in our spiritual attitude as well as sometimes our methods. Now, the word for change in the Greek is called metamorphosis. You've probably heard that term before. And I had someone I read that just shortened that a little bit and said we need to morph. I like that term. We need to morph. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Morphing. Changing. Understand what metamorphosis means. It's not just outward change. It's change that begins on the inside and then grows outward to affect our habits, our thoughts, and our actions. We can fake change as Christians, but it won't last. To truly morph, to transform, we need to begin on the inside as God changes us spiritually and affects our life. We see here that we need to morph to reach the spiritually sick and needy. Jesus went after and attracted sinners. Note what it says there at the very first verse. Jesus went out. Rather than hanging around the synagogue or the temple or the learned sinners where they would argue about the law, Jesus went out to where the people were. We need to be fishers of men, he tells us. But too often we're simply keepers of the aquarium, those already here. Like Matthew, he was a despised sinner, a tax collector. Jesus reached out to him. Not only did Jesus love him, Jesus said, I want you to follow me and become one of my disciples. Now that was scandalous. Now many of you may be aware that tax collectors were way down there on the respect list. Okay? Tax collectors made their money by charging extra over the tax. They were not actually paid as employees. But basically the Romans didn't care what they charged as long as the Romans got their tax revenue. So it's not uncommon for tax collectors to charge a whole lot more for the tax they said you owed, so they themselves would be taken care of. And you never saw a poor tax collector, folks. They were all rich. And that was Levi. He was despised by everybody. But Jesus reached out to him. Why? Because Jesus hung out with those who were hurting and unloved. Those who were unlovely, he cared about. Problem people, he cared about. Now let's be honest here. There are people out there in our world, in our community, they're not very lovable, are they? Maybe their lifestyle is something you don't care for. Maybe their personality makes you crazy. Maybe they are needy people. People who always have some kind of physical or emotional need where they seem to wear you out. And let's be honest, you see them, you try to avoid them, right? There's probably some people in this town that when you're at Walmart, you see them and go, oh. Okay? You're laughing because you know how true it is, right?
Yes.
We all have people that make us crazy. They're unlovable. They're needy. I know I spend some time at the food pantry periodically, and I see some of those people there. Now, my heart goes out to them. At the same time, I know that they can wear you down with their needs. But that's the kind of people Jesus went for. Why did Jesus do this? Because they did have needs that he could offer the answer to. Jesus was people-driven and mission-driven in life, okay? In contrast, the Pharisees were different. The Pharisees avoided and repelled sinners, and they liked it that way. They were too good to hang around the needy, unlovable people. The Pharisees loved to avoid the problem-plagued, messy people of his time. Often those people had gotten into the mess of their lives because of sin. And the Pharisees, rather than caring about that, said, see, see, if you'd done it our way, you wouldn't be in such a mess. Rather than caring about their situation. We need to understand that too often, we're more like the Pharisees than we are like Jesus. You have to understand that they contaminated everything around them with their proud, self-righteous spirituality, thinking they were better than everybody else. They were more concerned about maintaining their self-righteous lifestyle, their dead self-righteousness, than reaching out and caring for others. They loved the religious traditions and weren't willing to bend on them. The Pharisees were selfish, tradition-driven people, whereas Jesus was a people, mission-driven person. What kind of person are we going to be? We must decide, folks, whether we're going to be Christ-like and go out and reach out to the sinners of the world, or we're going to be Pharisees, where we hole up in our nice buildings and think about avoiding those that need Jesus the most. We need to be mission-driven and people-driven rather than self-centered driven and tradition-driven. Which one are we going to be? But there's more here. If you go on and read, you'll see in verses 33 and 34 these words. The Pharisees said to him, Jesus, John's disciples often fast and pray, and so the disciples of the Pharisees. But yours go on eating and drinking. Jesus answered, can you make the guests of the bridegroom fast while he's with them? You see, Jesus saw through their superficial religious traditions to realize that they weren't doing it for the right reasons. Don't focus on empty, meaningless religious regulations, is what he's telling us. Fasting is not a bad religious exercise. We probably could do more of it. I know I could. How about you? At the same time, it became a way for people to say, I'm better than you are because I fasted for 2 days. It lost the true meaning for the Pharisees and many others. But it was still emphasized as they went through the motions of fasting, not doing it for the right reasons. So often, we today can go through the experience of being involved in church and worship and other religious activities, and it's lost true meaning for us. We're doing it because we've always done it that way. And we've forgotten the reason we do it that way to begin with. Instead, Jesus was different. He focused on being with people and celebrating. See, that's what they're being attacked for. The disciples were not busy being serious, sour, sober people. You know the kind we talk about. Instead, they were enjoying one another. They were enjoying being in the presence of Christ. Remember what Levi did? He threw a banquet. He threw a party for Jesus. We know the Pharisees didn't like that. Folks, when Christianity no longer has room for fun and joy, it's not Christianity any longer. It's Pharisaical churchism. And we need to understand that we need to have that joy and celebration in our life because we celebrate Jesus Christ. That's what the disciples did. That's what Levi did with his friends. And Jesus loved it. Folks, if you have an idea that Jesus was some kind of sober, sour, legalistic person, you don't have the Jesus of the Bible. You have a man who loved life, who loved people. He could be tough when he needed to be, but he loved people. He celebrated with people, and we need to be the same way. We cannot allow ourselves to become people that we strangle the life out of the Christian experience. And the celebration that Jesus was involved in was done in the customs and the style of the day. And we need to be sure that we need to continue our Christian value system, but not get so involved in being different in the world we no longer can relate to the world. We should never accept the world's values that are against the Bible, but neither should we reach the point where we're so different that we cannot even connect to the rest of the world. Jesus knew how to be with people. He knew how to be with the real people of his time and celebrate with them, and we need to do so as well. Jesus approved of Levi's party for him, even though the Pharisees didn't. Jesus approved the disciples being with him and enjoying their experience, rather than worrying about fasting and other things. The Pharisees didn't. We need to morph today, folks. We need to morph into a people of celebration and joy where it shows wherever we are. Now, here's the problem. I think we're more that way than we used to be, but we're still struggling with the image of being people that are so strict that people are afraid that if I come to Christ, I can't ever have fun. I had someone tell me that a while back. I said, I was talking about Christ. He goes, well, but you're a Baptist, aren't you? I said, yeah. He goes, you're not allowed to have fun. And I said, well, there are certain things that we don't do. And I talked to him about that, and he was surprised that we were allowed to have fun at all. He thought if he cracked a joke, even a clean joke, it was sinful. Because Christians are so serious, they can't be people of joy. Now that used to be a lot of old-time Baptists, 50, 60, 70 years ago. I'm not saying I'm just saying it has happened in other churches. But that's not the way it should be today, folks. When we're people of Jesus Christ, we're people of celebration and joy. People with a smile on our face, not busy judging everybody for everything they do, but loving them. We need to morph into that people of celebration and joy. We need to focus on that rather than religious rules, regulations, and traditions. Now, traditions can be good. I have my own personal set of traditions I do as a person, as a Christian. I'm not saying traditions are always bad. However, if traditions are not in the Bible and they're keeping us from Jesus, we need to look at changing them. Okay? Let me repeat that. If traditions are not of the Bible, of Jesus, and they're keeping us from connecting to people, we need to consider changing them right now. What will that be? Well, it depends on you. It depends on what's going on in a particular church. But we need to be constantly evaluating and saying, is that truly of God? Or is that just something I grew up with all my life? And I can't change it because I'm comfortable with it, though it may be keeping people from coming to Christ. One tradition that has changed, and I think it's largely good, is the tradition of what we wear to church. Now, when I was growing up, it was suits, ties, and dresses, right? There's a story told of a young man who was a hippie type, and he had tried drugs and rock and roll and sex, and that wasn't working for him, so he decided, hey, I might try this Jesus thing I've been hearing about. So he was walking down the street and he saw a church, which happened to be a church that was Baptist. I won't tell you the name of it because it does exist. And he thought, well, I'll go in and check it out. So he walks in his jeans and sandals and long hair, and he gets into the foyer area about to go in, and the deacons immediately stopped him and said, what are you doing here? He goes, well, I came to hear about this Jesus. Well, you can't come. You can't stay. Because they had a dress code and they had a haircut policy at this church. And he didn't meet that haircut policy. They literally, folks, picked him up, carried him out, and threw him out of the church. Jesus cried that day, didn't he? So that's one tradition that's changed. Now, frankly, sometimes people dress a little more informally than I particularly care for, but I don't think Jesus cares. I think he cares about this, not this. And that's changed, and that's good. There may be other traditions we need to evaluate as Christian individuals as well as the church to truly reach out to the world and be a people of joy and celebration. But now, as we continue our story, we see the parable that Jesus gives us. Begin with verse 36 through verse 38, we have these words. Jesus told them this parable. Remember, parable being a little story. No one tears a patch from a new garment and sews it in an old one. If he does, he will have torn a new garment, and the patch from the new will not match the old. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, new wine will burst the skins. The wine will run out, and the wineskin will be ruined. No, new wine must be poured into new wineskins. And no one after drinking the old wine wants the new, for he says, the old is better. We see here that we need to morph to become new as both people and the church. We can't just patch up the old. We need to become new in our traditions, in our spirituality. Jesus is saying, the Pharisees are this, I am this. You can't mix a little bit of Phariseeism with who I am. Folks, understand something. We can be a Pharisee or we can be a true Christian. You can't mix the two. Jesus talks about the change, that morph I was talking about, that we must take to follow him as individuals. We can't just patch up the old religious traditions that we may have, or the way we've always done things, or continue the old and hope it works, because it does not work. Today, if I had a dial telephone, remember them? How many of you remember dial telephones? Okay. Some of you kind of remember as you saw it on TV once in ancient history, right? If I tried to plug that into my telephone plug jack, I'm not sure it would even work anymore because everything's digital. Okay? I can't make my old telephone work with the new telephone system. And there's much that we have been in the past and do in the past as Christians that won't work today. I can honestly tell you, folks, that some old-time Baptists were more Pharisees than Baptists. Okay? I was talking to a family member years ago, and they grew up believing that, boy, couldn't watch TV, couldn't watch movies, you know. If you were having fun, it was wrong, okay? That's the old-time Phariseeism that we had at one time. That's not what Jesus is offering today. This change must be total and a continual transformation in our life, folks. We should be always constantly transforming ourselves into the likeness of Christ and what he wants for us to do in our life. We just can't patch up our old lives like the Pharisees tried to do with legalism. We've got to be willing to be made new in Jesus Christ. We must morph. We must transform. We cannot transform the old style. We can't just patch up the old styles of doing church and the structures within the church. We must morph as God leads us to transform. But you know what? It's hard. We don't like it. As I've gotten older, I found out I don't care for change a whole lot. Okay? I like the way it's been done in the past. Especially kind of technology is what I struggle with, folks. Okay? It changes every 10 seconds. I just can't keep up. And I don't want to. Yeah? I bet some of you are the same way. We get comfortable with the way we do church. We get comfortable with the way we do Christianity. And we're not willing to be challenged and to be transformed into what Jesus wants us to become. Folks, if you're comfortable and have been a long time, my guess is you're out of God's will. Because he's constantly nudging us forward in our spirituality and in the way we do church. We must morph. We must transform. We don't like it. It's hard. It can be painful. But it tells us in 2 Corinthians 5:17 these words. Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old is gone, and the new has come. Sometimes I'll be reading my Bible and praying, and God will say, it's time to do some personal business, Russ. Okay, what is it? And inevitably, it's an area of my life that I'm comfortable with. I don't want to change. But God wants me to change. And I don't like it. If I have a choice, I can stay where I am or I can go where Jesus wants me to go. Which one should I choose, folks? Should I stay where I am or should I go where Jesus wants me to go? That's right. It's all about him. And we all need to do the same thing. The power to morph, to change, to transform comes from the power of the Holy Spirit, folks. If you try to do it by yourself, you will fail because we are creatures of habit. God's new wine is fermenting in our lives, folks. The new wine always will burst the old wineskins of how we've lived our life and the way we like to do things. If there's no bursting going on, there's no new wine in your life. Let me repeat that. If there's no bursting going on, there's no new wine in your life. Now here's the problem. He says at the end. Take a look. It says that no one after drinking the old wine wants the new wine, for he says the old wine is better. What Jesus was saying was this. When you're set in your ways like the Pharisees were, maybe you're more of a Pharisee Christian than you are a Jesus Christian. Now, Pharisee Christian is kind of a contradiction in terms, isn't it? That's where some people are. They like those rules and regulations. When we're that way, folks, we don't want to accept the new wine. Why? Because it takes us places we don't want to go. It wants us to become things we don't want to become because we're comfortable where we are. Now, here's the problem. Some of us are old wine Christians. Well, I ask you today, are you willing to drink the new wine that Jesus has for you, whatever that is? Or are you going to hold on to that old wine? Because it's the way you've always done it in your life. It may not be the best way, but it's the way you're comfortable with. Will you drink the new wine that Jesus wants? Will we become, folks, as individuals, the new wineskins for that new wine? Will we as a church be willing to develop new wineskins in ministry to reach out to our community that contain God's new wine? Or will we merely try to patch up, unsuccessfully, the old wineskins because that's the way it's always been done in our lives and our church for dozens, if not, hundreds of years? What does God want you to do? To be willing to take that new wine of Jesus and what he wants to do in your life into your life. Are you going to stick with the old wine like the Pharisees? Or are you going to be willing to take the new wine through the power of the Spirit of God to become what Jesus wants you to become? And will our church do the same thing? Are you willing to be a new wine Christian? Or are you going to hold on to the old wine? Like the Pharisees did. Let's stand as God speaks to us.